In today's interview, I'm thrilled to speak to two phenomenal human beings and leaders in the field of nature-based health, Nathan Siles and Dr. Nicholas Dawe. Together with Dr. Ryan Barclough, they co-authored the book BioTra: An Approach to Healthy Living in the Modern World, integrating advanced biophysics to support fundamental health, vitality, resilience, and longevity. Welcome, Nathan and Nick. How are you?
Really well, Alison. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, second that. Thank you, Alison.
So good to have you here. I know you two and Dr. Ryan have come together and created this powerful BioTra approach, which we're definitely going to dive into deeply. But before that, tell me, how did this partnership come to be?
Well, it's actually an interesting story. And first of all, I've known Ryan for very many years. We've been friends and colleagues for a really long time. But it was through a mutual patient of ours that the connection with Nathan was finally forged. And this gentleman who was seeing all three of us at the same time used to tell me so much about Nathan and just used to speak so highly about him. And unfortunately, it took the gentleman to pass away. And in his legacy, one of his last requests was that everyone in his team, he'd kind of assembled, in his estimation, an A team of sorts of various eclectic people. And those people were to run a retreat headlined by probably the best functional doctor that I'm aware of, at least in the Southern Hemisphere, Dr. Christabel Yo. And so she pulled together a retreat with all of the people that were dealing with this guy. And we co-facilitated a retreat in Australia. And it was that time that I met Nathan. And, you know, when you hear about someone's greatness secondhand, you can sometimes think, yeah, cool. I'm sure he's really good, but, you know, we'll see when we finally meet. And then when I met him, I was just like, okay, this guy's the real deal. This guy has knowledge for days, and he just he absolutely walks the walk and talks the talk. And so after that, Nathan and I became friendly and we started to chat, and it became apparent to me that all of the great stuff in the biophysics landscape that is relative, it's old science put through a new lens with greater technicality and deeper insight, which is what science is great for, is just going right down the silo as deeply as it can. And I just marveled at the fact that their information held many of the keys to modern suffering, and yet the uptake of their science was so small in the general population. And so that got us thinking, hey, how can we develop something that is accessible for a lot of people, that doesn't deter people from the technicality in the language that's coming out of the biophysics sector, and is relatable already? People already know they need to do it. And so that sort of naturally was the physical practice and the mind-based practice that Ryan really fronts. And so we decided that we would weave something together so that anyone, whether they came from the biophysics landscape and were lacking that psycho-spiritual orientation, or they were lacking that appreciation for the full macro total body movement and all the ensuing biophysics that affords internally. And if someone came from any of the other lanes, they would get all of that biophysics greatness. So that was what sort of originally started the notion and the relationship. And we've been doing this now for years. And it's just a joy every time we pick up the phone or have some communication, because each of us values so highly what the other people bring. And it's just so earnest. Everyone's doing this for deeply the right reason, and not for commerce, and not to contribute to the massive, overwhelming information that people have to wade through and feel disempowered by every day.
Mm.
And I'll add, Alison, as well, that to add on to Nick's point, it's a real mess out there. We're in an information overload. And I know, at least, through my own personal health journey, which, I'm happy to get into briefly if you'd like, but really it's, it was a process of discovery and making a lot of mistakes and reading a lot and getting to a place where I feel comfortable enough to synthesize at least my expertise in the circadian mitochondrial biophysics side, and making it very actionable and practical. Because one of the things that I kept seeing is that people, become aware of certain things, but they don't realize the magnitude until they're in pain or suffering. And this is the challenge that I think we started sort of piecing together when we became, really close in weaving this book together, 3 or so years ago. And we had experience with retreats that we'd hosted in several locations around Australia, and great feedback from a lot of people that partook in that. And it gave us the opportunity to really make this not just because the book really is an encyclopedia of health, of total health, of foundational health. But because it's quite a number of pages, but it could have been a lot more. And we really distilled down such a gigantic, area of work across these three sectors into something that's, very, very practical. And I'm not going to lie, it was a big challenge to distill, the whole area of, quantum optics and biophysics and mitochondrial medicine and environmental lifestyle medicine all into very actionable, simple sort of, phrases and paragraphs and practical strategies. So the way we sort of wove this together onto something that everyone can do in a daily practice was, I think, the magic. And that's what I love about, all of us three geniuses coming together, and, all of our geniuses that came together and brought this into, a form where people can not only, find some really interesting ideas and, revisit the book years and years down the track and still discover new things in there, but also be able to actually bring something very practical into their life. And in some ways, we did the hard thinking for you. So it's all there. You just need to, look at even the practical steps of it. And if you do get interested in the theory or, some of the details behind it, you can read it, in more depth. So it's a versatile, weaving together.
Yeah, that's quite important. People are scared of physics. It's a quite complex and abstract stuff. But when you break it down into simple practical steps they can implement in the daily life, that's value adding just by itself. That's a beautiful start. Behind every great creation, I know there's a story to be told. Nathan, you touched on your story a little bit, but I'd love to know more about you. What is your story, and how did that lead you to who you are and what you do today?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a bit of a background because I think it's important to know, what started the journey and where my awareness started to change, because I certainly wasn't on this path until I had a big wake up call. So my first wake up call was when I was 8 months old, and I don't remember this, but I was developing ocular cancer, and I was just living a normal life. Everyone in my family thought everything was going well, and then suddenly my eyes started deviating from the center off to the side, and mum noticed this and took me to an ophthalmologist, and I was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, which is quite a rare sort of juvenile cancer, and definitely deadly if not treated. So I endured 30 days of radiation therapy, and that got rid of the tumors. There was about 20 on each eye, inside the eye on the actual retinal tissue. So the area of the eye that captures the light and sends those electrical signals and those light signals to the brain. So clearly there was some problems there. And anyway, I was able to get through that treatment and save about 10% visual acuity. So I'm legally blind. I can't do all those things that most people take for granted, driving and being fully independent, in all the ways that everyone says. But I learned differently at school. But the problem, I guess the lucky part of this was it didn't spread to other parts of the brain because they were able to isolate it in the retinas. So really there was no other sort of brain damage. So I was still able to grasp concepts and memorize things and learn just in a different way through auditory rather than through visual stimulus. So then, I went in and graduated high school early and, skipped a year and went into investment banking after I went and did a college degree in commerce and then accounting and finance. And then I was like, well, something felt off. And, to me, it was neglecting my true path that I felt like I needed to be on. and that I was definitely limited by early in my life. And then what do you know? Knock, knock on the door, testicular cancer at 24. And it was a shock. And I was just in the peak of my, young career, getting promotions and, getting rewarded for those, the hard work I was doing in an office tower under artificial light with a suit on and staring at blue light screens. And, it was something that I was a swimmer and a soccer player, so my fitness and body was fine. It appeared fine, and my diet was always very good. Mum was into organic foods, and I was never eating too many carbs. Never really been a massive sugar addict or anything like that. And I asked the big question, why me? Why did this happen? And the investigation into my environment and my lifestyle became center of attention. And during my chemotherapy to treat the cancer after my surgery, was my naturopath actually sent me a podcast of Dr. Jack Kruse, and that's when I started looking into the biophysics of cancer. And it was the first time I thought, I'd never done science in high school. I'd never done that in college. And I was like, this is all new to me. But I knew there was something important here because, he just has a way with him. And Jack as well. So there's a way that he speaks, and it's like, oh, I have to pay attention to this. So I just dove in, and I took a year off work to recover from the chemotherapy. And that's when I found his work. And then I found Nick Lane's work, the mitochondrial bioenergetic specialist. Then I found Doug Wallace's work. Then I found Gerald Pollack's work on water. Then I started finding even more on physics. And it was actually Jim Al-Khalili who got me really interested in physics for the first time, because he started applying the physics of the universe to your own life. And it started
Yes.
seeming relevant for the first time ever. And suddenly it was somewhat of a selfish relevance that I started realizing, hey, my body, my system, it actually works this way. And so I started following all those different experts and joined their communities. And basically the next 6, 7 years was really, dedicated to doing my, what Jason Borden Smith, our friend, Nick and Ryan's friend, calls mitochondrial PhD. And so I really, dove into that program, and the entire way through, I was experimenting on myself with seeing how cold I could get into. And, 1 degree Celsius, 34 Fahrenheit, getting in for 25 minutes and seeing if I could still, get my circulation back after, a minute or two by jogging on the spot. And, getting into the sun at UV index 14 and staying there the entire day without any shade, without getting burnt. And climbing, Rainbow Mountain at 5.1 kilometers up in the sky in Peru with just my earth runners and a pair of shorts on while everyone else was taking donkeys up there, and breathing through the nose. And so I was able to do all these things, and it was just like, hang on, I had cancer a few years ago, and now my body and my spirit and my mind is capable of so many things. So that's when I was privileged enough to spend a bit of time with Dr. Jack Kruse, and I actually was quite close with him for a while, and he challenged me to start working with some patients and share my knowledge so that I could start helping others. And so I started doing that, and now I would say 7 or 8 years later, after that conversation he and I had, I've basically helped 1,000 patients to look into themselves and find a way to actually implement choices and change their environments to, reverse a lot of the symptoms and sometimes even the underlying root causes of many chronic diseases that most people think are irreversible. So it's been exciting to see, physical proof in reality of some of the theory, I guess you would say, that is quantum, that is, on the fringe of science. And so we're really at an exciting point right now where not only do I believe, the things that I've learned, and do I feel the actual things that I've learned, and I'm not even in 1% worried about ever getting cancer for a third time because of what I know and the practices that I implement every day, but also that it's going to be really exciting to see how we can bring this behavioral psychology of bringing something practical to people so that it's easy there's a low barrier to entry for people to bring in these strategies into their life. So they don't have to inconvenience themselves too much and still can live a modern life, which is why BioTra is all about an approach to healthy living in a modern world. And so we can still not have to sacrifice our beautiful technology that we all love, and living sometimes indoors and traveling on planes and all these things that our biology is struggling to get used to, biophysically, psychospiritually, biomechanically, everything. And so we're still, I think, at the cutting edge of making this accessible. And that's sort of our mission and my story.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Your childhood story is very inspiring. We do have a same turning point with Dr. Jack Cruz, which completely changed my life around as well. Nick, your story must be very different. You've been an athlete since childhood. Tell us, how did that take you to what do you do now?
Well, my story in comparison is very mundane. And I'm always on talks and in groups where people want to understand what was the catalyst for why I think the way I think. And I don't have a great one. As you say, I was immersed in sport early on in my life and continue to be so. And I guess my mother is a very academic woman. And I probably wasn't very good at school. No, that's been a little bit ambiguous. I definitely wasn't good at school. I had a lot of difficulty learning early on, especially in primary school. And she never, ever put any pressure on me. In fact, she applauded things like effort and perseverance, with there being no obligation, no pressure, nothing like that. So consequently, with very little academic pressure, I became a good soccer player and continued to play outdoors and just eat when I was hungry and do all the sort of the normal kid things. And as I progressed through school, the lack of pressure put on me paradoxically started to allow me to really enjoy that learning experience. But it was heavily crafted through the lens of the humanities. So I did no maths or science at school. And courtesy of the sport, which was largely inherited by my father, not to leave him out of the picture, I had to pick a vocation. And a historian probably wasn't going to pay the bills. So even though I loved history and theology and Latin, I decided to do chiropractic solely because throughout my athletic career, my chiropractor was a little bit more motivating and charismatic than my physiotherapist. I loved them both, but the optimism that the chiropractor always gave to me, I incorrectly and erroneously assumed was part of the profession and not just part of his personality. So then I was in for a rude awakening when I joined a science degree. With the lack of science and seemingly all this rote learning and retained knowledge by my peers. So I really battled. And it was then that all the humanities and the lateral thinking, and now I understand to be a more fluid consciousness courtesy of the movement and the immersion with the environment and these basic coherence patterns that were just etched into my existence, that I saw science with a completely different lens. And that's when it became really interesting to me. So the further I went down that path, the better I got at it, the more I was joining dots that seemingly were difficult for other people to join, right up to the point where that became adversarial to the sum of the academic community in my degree. And it was at that junction where I just had to split and go lateral. And I found extraordinary mentors at that junction, one in particular who left me really thinking about the body differently with the device called the OOV. His name's Daniel. And that really started that journey where I could meld together what I understood about the body. And I had this very sensitive testing device, which was my own body, and, you know, very objectifiable means to measure that with the athleticism that I was still involved in. And I was coaching at the time, so I could see these notions roll out through athlete upon athlete upon athlete and see which ones really took and which ones needed other little hand holding steps to integrate, and so on and so forth. I won't bore you with all the details. And then 15 years later, here I am. I think about things a little differently. It seems to work really well in the clinical setting. It seems to be well understood and received by people that I share it with at both a philosophical level and a technical level. And my mission here is simple. The world is wallowing in suffering and pain, and I want to commit my life to making a difference en masse in a very egalitarian way, breaking down the barriers between the practitioner class and the consumer class, and starting to give back what I think are the keys to the kingdom back to the common man and woman, so that they can enjoy and feel like I feel, and like all of my family and my colleagues and close friends feel, which is just brimming with life all day, every day, no matter what shows up, no matter what compressions flow into your three-dimensional existence. You just take it on. I've got more energy than I know what to do with, so I invested in cool projects like writing books and sharing the messages and innovating new ways of doing things. And I never thought I was very creative. That was probably just a erroneous belief, but I've now come to realize that I'm pretty good at creating new and better ways of doing things that are everybody's birthright.
That is beautiful. I can see how you two can gel together so well. One is about all the physical laws of this universe. You are implementing this beautifully into real life, let it flow in everyone, average people. That is beautiful. Let's get into the details of the BioTra approach. The title is Approach to Healthy Living in the Modern World. What does a modern world encompass? So we talk about lots of suffering, the pain in the modern world. How is that different from what's supposed to be like the natural world? Or what are the misalignments you see in modern living and human biology?
Can I jump in, Nath?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think actually, Alison, the question is because a lot of the good theory has already been espoused up to this point. People understand a lot about our world and a lot about the historical world where potentially some of these adversaries weren't present. But the difference between our approach and most of the ones that have gone before us is that they advocate for a return to something that is impractical and alienating and not socially really acceptable. So
Like
it's
going to the jungles.
it's not good enough to completely demand for health and thriving that everybody disbands with everything that we've created as a population on Earth up to this point in time. There needs to be methods and manners by which people can access full coherence, full fluidity, full power in their body, full optimization of aquaphotomics within the structures that we've come to live in. Now, we could spend 20 minutes explaining the breakdown of what's transpired, but I think it's suffice. I'll do my physical component and then I'll hand over to Nathan to talk about the biophysics. And I want to keep mine really brief because I think people know. In a nutshell, nature had provisions to retain the deeply encoded developmental movement strategies and ensuing health and ensuing function, and retain that by virtue of all this richness in the sensory landscape around them. In the modern buzzwords, that's sensory motor integrity. And another buzzword, it's spatiotemporal richness. So when we used to look up there and around there and walk on uneven surfaces and never sit on chairs and never walk on completely leveled floorboards in shoes, that was an era where people could develop like children do and then hold on to that the entirety of their life with very little biomechanical afflictions other than what was incidental. And now we've got a situation where any stressor from any of the domains flows into someone's body. Their body undergoes a very normal and natural response that I believe is as historically pertinent as it is today. They adopt a rigid defensive biomechanical strategy. Now, the problem is that nature never allowed that strategy to persevere and etch itself into all following loops that set their tempo on that original sensory motor disturbance. Nowadays we do. So people can perpetuate and encode that rigidity strategy in their body for the rest of their life. And the sad thing is a lot of people try really hard to do really, really good things for themselves. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. And all of the good things that existed up until elements of our approach would merely either be a stopgap or would alter the course of the symptoms complex just into another corner where it would reemerge in the way that Nathan described his cancer journey, or most commonly, and also in the worst case, would merely compound their rigidity strategy, never getting out from underneath the same degree of pain and stiffness and performance leakages that they were already experiencing in the first instance. So we needed a strategy, we needed a method that not only returned their body back to the original fluid state, but held their hand through all of the reparational phases and then wasn't constrained to a clinical rehabilitative drive, but could also provide, it's contending with the cockatoo, one of the downsides of doing these talks in nature, but could also then provide the perfect activation for a fully contained movement strategy or an activation before any other training that tickled their fancy. It's really succinct, it's simple to do, and it's deep. It's deep, it feels great, it's very somatic, it's very empowering, and everybody that's ever done it has just gone, oh wow, this is my body, this thing's pretty damn amazing, and I'm now really, really in love with my body and what I can do with it, and that just opens the doors to a great life. Over to you, Nathan.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Nick, like returning to that foundational, state within the body and within the mind and within, the environment is a foundation for what our body remembers. And so much of what we are is just forgotten. It's not really the fact that we need to integrate new strategies, new things in. It's more peeling back and understanding how we were built and then deciding how you want to evolve going forward. If you have white skin and you have a Northern European mitochondrial DNA signature, which we call a haplotype, then you could actually move down to the equatorial zones. You could move from Northern Canada all the way down to Costa Rica, and you could actually reproduce and create a new life there for 3 or 4 generations, and your skin will go darker, your mitochondria will change its little DNA signature, and your digestion system will change, your ability to adapt to diseases will change. And so we see this as evidence of you get to control your destiny. Now, the problem with the biophysical landscape is that it's changed so rapidly in the last 100 years that our bodies, our mitochondrial DNA, our nuclear genome are struggling to keep up with the rapidity of changes that we're making. So think about it. 150 years ago, we were horse and carriage. We weren't flying across continents in 6 hours. We weren't, living completely indoor lifestyles, 93% either indoors in a house or in a moving vehicle that's closed. So we have such a different world that our body and everything in our body is trying to adapt to. And we don't argue that you need to go back to nature. We argue that what you need to do is introduce the changes slowly so your body can have the adaptation ability to have the best chance to thrive at all times, not just deal with pain, crash, come back up, adapt rapidly, deal with next pain. We're talking about like a standard, beautiful incline to retaining functionality, retaining brain chemistry, retaining spiritual integrity seated in the body, not trying to escape, not trying to, find, another place. So in the last 30 years, we've actually gone even more of a crazy biophysical adaptation, which has gone not only from in the 90s, we had 50-50 indoors, outdoors, but all the way to indoors, but we've actually taken away the fire that was coming out of the ceiling, which was incandescent bulbs. So we've gotten rid of those lights. We've introduced LEDs, narrowband spiking cheesecakes, because every time you're inside, you're under that cheesecake light. It's spiking your blood glucose as if you ate a bite of cheesecake. So you have this total metabolic shift when you're under LEDs that don't have a balanced spectrum of blue and red and infrared. And so you've introduced this visible toxicity and ran away from nature's visible light, because the windows also have low E glass that filters a huge portion, especially of the red and infrared. And that's for heat reasons, trying to keep indoor environments energy efficient while the occupants become energy deficient. But then we've also introduced 25 on average in America, wireless devices inside the home. Now, that's not AC powered cables or, smart meters or anything that's part of the house that is also an additional field. We're talking about 25 wireless devices. That's just phones, iPads, Alexa, Google Voice, robotic vacuum cleaners, digital baby monitors, wireless baby monitor, all these cacophony, this symphony of disorganization, entropy creating, emitting devices that are totally scrambling the aquaphotomics. And we mentioned that word earlier because we truly believe that the aquaphotomics are the most important, which means 99 out of every 100 molecules in your body are H2O water. That means we're beings of water, and we store the energy in that water, and we use that, and we hopefully release less than we're able to capture. And that's how we stay alive. So when our water becomes unstructured and changed, and entropy and chaos get pushed into it from these chaotic wireless pulsing devices, we end up getting dehydrated. Our mitochondria don't work as well, and our water battery diminishes. So we've become energy inefficient. We've become energy deficient, and we've changed our environment so rapidly in such a short period of time that our bodies are struggling to adapt. So it's not about returning to nature. You would think that's an easy way to do it. And yes, I'm sitting outside. I set up my desk outside wherever I am. I make sure that whatever, if you're afraid of mosquitoes, if you're afraid of, cell towers out here, if you're afraid of whatever tries to keep humidity or whatever it is, find little fans for your laptop so it doesn't overheat. Get a little, mosquito mesh around you, whatever you need to do, but create a space where you can easily access nature in your own backyard, in your own home, wherever it is, in a park nearby somewhere. Don't go to WeWork. Don't go and work inside an office environment if you have the luxury to work from home. And don't work inside your office next to your wireless router if you have the option to. Go and find a space outside, use cables, and that way you can just change your environment slightly so that you can reintroduce full spectrum light, full spectrum sound, full spectrum hot and cold oscillations. So it's not just a stagnant temperature. Reintroduce all the reactive oxygen species that are coming off all the plants behind me. All the soil is releasing nitric oxide. It's releasing hydrogen peroxide. This is why COVID didn't spread when you're outside, because these free radicals from the trees behind me and the soil killed any spreading of any virus or bacteria that harms the system. So the more that you live in that environment, the less you have to worry about from other things. And the same thing when you collect more light and you retain more light and you're healthier, those bugs don't bite you anymore. There's a lot of mosquitoes around. I'm not getting bit. So they see light. They try to bite you because they see the light coming out of you. So if you change your environment, so something very, very simple like that, you can still live digitally connected, live a modern life, but you can also reintroduce all of those frequencies. And then you add the amazingness of engineering. And this is where I get really passionate. This is where I'm also, releasing and if I can, my greatest wish is to actually create indoor living spaces that are, on a harmful sense, biologically inert. They are equivalent to outdoor environments. So we're reintroducing full spectrum light through bulbs, through different light fixtures and fittings. We're reintroducing and minimizing all of those EMFs so you can reintroduce the proper air. No more VOCs in paint, no more furniture off-gassing. So we go in and do building biology where we clean the entire environment inside a house from sterility. We reintroduce nature. Sterility is not clean. That's dirty. Your microbiome gets narrowed when you use chemicals and when you have sterility inside the house. So, one of the things I'm trying to do is to create as many products and as many solutions for people that are low cost, easily accessible, that they can bring into their homes for the times that they're not able to get outside, for the times that it is thunderstorms and their kids can't play in the yard. They shouldn't have to choose between, oh, do I get wet and feel really uncomfortable and risk getting electrocuted, or stay inside and, lose my health? Well, now when you go inside, you can introduce these frequencies of light, sound, magnetic fields, electric fields, air quality, and all these different materials and things. And then you can actually have this indoor environment that's like a sanctuary. It truly can be a place where you can heal indoors. And when we bring those spaces, not just to your home, but to your office, to hospitals, to airports, to sports stadiums, to airplanes, to other things, that's where I see my sort of engineering brain turns on and goes, okay, look to nature. How did she do it? Let's create something so we can live harmoniously with that in a modern world. And I think that's where biophysics and actually thinking about creating new things, it's not new. Nature's already done it.
Yeah.
Just look there, figure out how you can package it and get it to as many people as you possibly can, and allow people to not have to sacrifice and their choice for their health.
That sounds so fascinating. Lots of people have so many excuses. They can't go to nature. They can't do lots of things they should do. They actually have lots of answers, but they just can't somehow implement it in their life. They'll be so helpful to those people. What does that look like? If you can paint a picture of that modern living, but nature-based, what does that look like?
I mean, I'll jump in first, Nick, because it's a classic question I get asked all the time, which is how do you create not only a sleep sanctuary in the bedroom, which is the most important because you get your 8 hours of rest. When you get into deep autophagy, you can actually start regenerating. And so we focus there first, and we make sure that it's dark at night, cold, cool, well ventilated. It has zero EMF, zero electric field, zero magnetic, zero low-level currents, zero radio frequency pulsing, zero dirty electricity. And once we mitigate that stuff, which can actually quite easily be done in a day or two, you can actually, and sometimes it actually doesn't cost a lot, depending on the house wiring and all the different things. Then we've cleaned up 8 hours of your entire life. That's 109 days per year that you are now completely free of all the modern stresses. That's a third of the year that you're ready and you're regenerating. So now we have to look at the other third. Generally, you spend at least a third at work. And so wherever that is, if your office or, at home in an office or whatever it is, like I said before, find a way to create a space where you're, getting the full spectrum light. If that's indoors, you need to get bulbs. You need to change those cheesecake lights. You need to use wires, use fiber optic cabling. You need to go and, fix the desk setup so everything's grounded. All these different things that you can do. And then all you have to do is worry about the other third of your life that you're going out and about and doing things. And with those, you take your blue light blocking glasses with you. You go and use EMF shielded clothing. Whenever you travel, you can go and make sure that if you're walking on the side of the street, the one that's sunny, go on that side. The one that has the power lines, go on the other side. You can make little subtle changes. It's totally unconscious after you create a tiny little habit. And then suddenly you're actually realizing you're mitigating your exposures so dramatically. And once again, like Nick was saying, you'll find you actually have over brimming with energy that you can actually share and give more, connect more, create more. And you're actually going to be liked by a lot more people. So it's attacking, in my opinion, it's looking at those three areas. How do I create sleep? How do I create a nice workspace or downtime, especially if there's children involved? And how do I protect myself in the world? And it doesn't have to take a lot of money, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Nick?
Sounds brilliant. Sounds brilliant. Nick, what do you have to add to that?
Well, I don't know if the popularity thing's really rubbing off on me yet, Nath, but I'll keep building my energy and see if it works. And secondly, I love cheesecake, but I didn't realize I was getting that from well, I don't have those lights, so I'm not getting any cheesecake at home. From a physical standpoint, we need to first resupply in a really, really fun and economical, not just in terms of finances, but in terms of time that it takes every day, the major sensory shareholders in people's bodies and nervous systems. And those shareholders are the spine. I'll come back to that one. That's a little more complex. The mouth, the eyes and the ears, the hands and the feet. Now, the problem is when there's an impoverishment in any of those systems, which is almost ubiquitous, you adopt a rigidity strategy. Add the second problem is that everything you then do, including breathing and swallowing and blinking with the rigidity strategy, further compounds the rigidity strategy, which is the reason why people become symptomatic in one way or another. So first of all, we have to reintroduce those major sensory partners in the body. And then that's historically been where some practices have kind of gotten off the train. And they're really great practices, but there's quite a significant jump between restoring that vitality and that richness and ultimately moving in a gainful and stimulating adult way. And so the next thing is you have to supply all of the little stepping stones between that sensory motor enrichment all the way through to really stimulating ways of moving the body. Now, I said I would come back to the spine because the spine's a little tricky. Once you procure your spinal tone as a mature being, you cannot ever consciously activate that infrastructure again. So if you just take an adult as a hypothetical and you put the adult back into neurological developmental movements, say, for example, on the ground, lying on their back or on their stomach on the ground, they do not return back to the time in their neurological development where they were originally lying on their back and on their stomach. And so the concept is that we have to add something in there. We use the OOV to do that. The concept is that by using the OOV in specific ways, someone can go back to a plasmic state of their spinal tone that is neurologically equivalent to the conditioning and the tone building and the reflexogenic nuances that were happening at that period in someone's life. So without that step, it's really, really hard to integrate the rest of the journey, even though many people have actually got really good methods for each part of the rest of the journey. No one has put them all together in a succinct way, and no one has ever introduced the deepest aspect of that medicine and handed that back to people in 30 minutes. So 30 minutes is all it takes if you want to use it as a standalone practice. And naturally, because it's us, there's a whole heap of biophysics woven into that 30 minutes. So that other third that Nathan was talking about in the day, if part of that other third, that remaining third, is where you train your body or where you go to look and feel good in a certain way, well, this third, what our method now slots into that third of someone's life where you're getting psycho-spiritual elements and tutelage on those matters, a very, very deep and stimulating embodiment practice, and woven biophysics laid in a sensible and pragmatic manner in there so that you get all three at the same time. That can really, you do that 3 times a week, that can really form the backbone of a modern health strategy that doesn't require 15 different practitioners poring over your particular brief, poking and prodding you and telling you how much is wrong with you. Let's take back 85% straight away. Let's give that straight back to the people. And then if there's something left after that, that's when the physician and the practitioner becomes of utmost value, because they're not wading through all this complexification and interrelated signs and symptoms. Another colleague of mine just wrote another book, and I'll just pull one element out of that book just to frame this up. Of the 11 pH systems, the fellow's name's Roger Price, by the way, of the 11 pH systems, if you do 11 to the factor of 11, you get nearly 40 million different content layer symptoms complexes. So imagine starting at that level from person to person and starting to try to do medicine from that level instead of flipping that and coming right from the beginning and starting to just take care of the ancestry in all of those lines and all of those tributaries that end up becoming that symptoms complex. Take care of that. 30 minutes, 3 times a week, if not more. You'll feel so good. You'll want to know more about what Ryan's saying. You want to know more about what Nathan's saying. All of a sudden, you're doing diurnal, sensible strategies in your life. You're doing different ways of thinking and framing up what it means to be alive and what it means to be a purposeful, peaceful, joyful human. And then whatever's left, medicine can take care of it.
That's wonderful. You mentioned 1/3 sleep, 1/3 office, and 1/3 something else. But in the modern life, lots of people actually have less than 1/3 of sleeping, the rest all in the office. What do you see in your practice among your clients, the most common patterns or common problems or common struggles they experience?
You want to go first, Nick?
The most common accompaniment, if it's not the main thing itself, is lethargy, apathy, and a lack of energy.
Lack of
That
energy.
gets in underneath almost everything else. It's side by side. Very seldom does someone come with a material problem. Not that lack of energy isn't a material problem, just for linguistic convenience, and has heaps of energy. I would say that if you can take care of your energy through these means, then a whole heap of your problems disappear.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And I know Nathan's going to be very, very excited about talking about next.
Oh, look, the biggest thing for me that I see is a breakdown of atomic and molecular organization. So let me put that in English. Really, what that means is there's a breakdown of structural coherence in not just the physical or the energetic or the astral or all the other planes, but really everything is actually out of order. The pot plant that you are, the moving pot plant, has holes in the bottom. And so many, and this is not just the lethargy and apathy, because that is a big problem, and I see that all the time. But I'm talking about the next level up, which are the people who want to add in strategies. They want to add energy back into the system. They're doing PEMF therapies. They're taking nicotine. They're taking methylene blue. They're doing NAD intravenous shots or supplementing magnesium each day. They're trying to patch those holes up and trying to add more water and sunlight to that pot that has a broken organizational system. And so just like what Nick was saying, take back that 85%, take back the foundations of your deepest organizational levels. And when you have that and you plug those holes of that pot plant, you can start adding energy to the system in a really productive way. And you'll find you don't need that intense amount of cold or heat or supplements or huge eating 5-6 meals a day or drinking all those protein shakes. You won't need that 1.2 grams per pound of protein to put on muscle. You might need half of that and you'll still put on muscle. So a lot of these strategies that everyone's focusing on, the next buzzword, the next Instagram, TikTok reel of how you can improve all those foundations of your body through adding something in. It's really, how do we reorganize at the deepest levels? And in order to do that, you go back to the foundations. And in biophysics, in circadian mitochondrial biophysics, really what it is how do I link to light and dark? How do I link to temperature? How do I link to my immediate environment? And how do I connect to that regularly? And if you do that, you will eventually start to build and repair that pot, and that soil will be changed. And if you can't do it in the environment in which you became sick, you need to go and move. You need to find an area that has a better light, water, and magnetic flux so that your body can then find that deepest layer of organization and build upon that. Because everything else, as Nick was saying, you're chasing these symptoms of, oh, I've got dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and autism and ADHD. Who would have thought they're probably all very similar underlying root problems? Their epigenetic expression is different because we're all a little bit different. So you go back to those core systems and you replug those holes. And trust me, when you know those holes are plugged, you know you'll be able to fall asleep within 10 to 15 minutes. You'll know that if you do wake, you'll wake maybe halfway through the night, because we were biphasic sleepers, but you really won't have to get up to go to the bathroom. You can sleep almost through the entire night, and you'll find that it won't be 6 hours. It won't be 5. It won't be disrupted. There won't be a lot of movement. you will actually sleep for that 8. And sometimes if you're at a deficit, that 9 hours. And this is the foundation that I like to help people understand is, and I'm not a big fan of wearable technology. Believe me, I very much dislike it. But if you do have this problem, and most people have a challenge with sleep, you should get yourself an Aura ring. You should get yourself an ultra human ring, something you can turn on airplane mode, something you can use to become your own health advocate and your own doctor, so that you can look at that for a couple weeks, tweak a few things, see what works for your body, and then find out how you can rebuild that structural foundation, because it happens while you sleep.
So,
Alison,
yeah, go
can
for
I
it,
just
Nick.
add an example there of the pot plant through the physical lens? If you are running a rigidity strategy, which I've mentioned, which I haven't really gone into detail about deliberately because I think it's just a little too lateral for this talk. Essentially, you'll use all of your prime moving musculature preferentially as stabilizers. And they're not metabolically designed to do that. So if you're using that strategy, you will not get out from underneath a massive energy leakage, regardless of how many supplements you take, regardless of how fastidiously you eat, regardless of how much you care about sleep. You just can't pay for the tax that your body is requiring in order to move around all day, every day like that.
This is the ultimate difference between mainstream health approaches and biophysics, right? For physics, you're trying to fix the pot plants. So it does the work the best. How do we fix that pot plants? What are the key inputs are we talking about to optimize?
Well, if you want the biophysics side, really, it's very practical. I want to keep this super practical for people so they can understand. So the most simple, easy, accessible, things that are free, get up 30 minutes before sunrise. And if you can't do that, go to bed a little bit earlier each night until you can do that. And if you can yoke your entire day to that little bit before sunrise and go for a little walk, do some meditation, step outside and touch the earth, reconnect with the environment in that time. The world's quiet. This is your opportunity to wake up gently. It's your time before the kids wake up, before you have to take anyone to school, before you need to get into work, before you have to think about anything big. Things will come to you. This is your time. So that space right there and the wind down routine before you go to bed is, to me, the two little counterpoints that you can always go back to a real energetic and informational input into your biology from the biophysical lens to plug those holes in that pot plant.
How does those light improve your body improvements, the masculine system?
Yeah. Yours, Nick? Yeah. Well, everything's coherence, and how muscles work. Essentially, the modern anatomical interpretation of muscles and slings is largely just a model for how the body works. I believe a preferential model to all of those previous models is the contractile field model by Philip Beach, who's an osteopath and an embryologist, and essentially makes a very convincing argument, to me at least, that the majority of movements are a relationship between these major embryologically derived fields of fascia, which is essentially slightly crystallized water inside the body. And so water and light are therefore woven very elegantly back into movement strategies, whereas it's a little bit of a jump if we use the muscular models. We can still explain it. It just takes a couple more steps to get there. But I think if we start to look through the lens of movement that way, it becomes really obvious how coherence fields and elasticity and fluidity and movement of fluids through the body. Don't forget, we have a whole movement system that is largely predicated on how well you can control and move compressible fluids and gases inside your system before we even talk about the active units of the muscles and those sorts of things anyway. So I think that's how it weaves together. But the answer to your first question, which are where do people start, is I think the truth, albeit an unscientific truth, is I think people have to make a small start on multiple parts of the circle. Instead of throwing all their eggs into one basket about their physical body, which may seem obvious if they have physical pain, or all their eggs into the mitochondrial basket if they've been told by a GP or a physician of any sort that they have some sort of mitochondrial problem, or all into the mind because their biggest grievance is of how they feel about themselves and the world. I think it's prudent and actually better for the consumer to make a small shift, a small adjustment in all three of those categories, and then just slowly start to expand their circle to be the fullness that they can be, the truth of who they are. They are the medicine. They've just forgotten that.
That's so beautiful. Just like you said before, you just want to peel layers what you had before and go back to the original blueprint of life. Just looking at the children, they behave very differently. They're always full of energy and they don't get tired at all. But somehow adult, we've been living for so many years, we lose that energetic state in our life. You talk about getting your light right in the morning. You talk about what the body take in as the inputs and all the symptoms we have and lack of energy. They are all the consequences of the bad inputs. So what other inputs do we need to pay more attention to? Make sure they are always, not always, but most times at the optimal level.
I'll let you handle that, Nick.
Okay. I think that, first of all, the sensory motor richness of someone's life is a low-hanging fruit. I think water, light, and magnetism, to borrow from Jack Kruse's original model, are the three obvious levers from the biophysical standpoint. And I think there's a two-pronged approach, and it would be lovely to defer this question to Ryan himself, who has just such a beautiful way with words in his silo. But a two-pronged approach between a completely new, for many, framework about understanding the essence of life and what it is to have life lived through you, and a practical approach to that, adding some elements to your life, or maybe, as is the case, taking some things away from your life to create that space for that framework to be espoused. And I think if you do those things, you'll see a change. And if you don't, if you're not one of the big percentage of that pie chart that sees an immediate change from making those implementations, you can be buoyed up by the fact that by making those changes, the change that you need to make will become much more realistic and much more tangible at the next incarnation of your attempts to enrich your own life.
Beautiful. Nathan, do you
Yeah,
have?
look, Alison, the only other thing I'd add to that, really, because it was quite complete in my eyes, is, to really reiterate, what Nick was saying earlier, taking one piece from each category. It's something that, low-hanging fruit, besides sunrise and besides creating a beautiful evening routine, something I'll borrow that Ryan really enriched my life about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was to create a small amount of silence and space in your life in every day. It doesn't have to be more than a minute if that's all you can handle. But that was something that was really, really easy for me to actually open up. And I used to find that I only got great ideas when I was either on the toilet, in the shower, or, I don't drive, so I didn't have that sort of, autonomous thinking time. But really there's those moments that maybe I was cooking something and it was something I'd already cooked before. But, when you do create that time and space, it actually gives you the key to your next step. And one of the fundamental principles that we truly and deeply not just believe, but we know at BioTra is really that your body is perfect. At every moment, it is doing absolutely everything to serve all of you and all the things you want to do and who you want to be. So the fault is not what your body's doing. The wisdom's there. Nature makes no mistakes. There's deep intention behind everything that you manifest as in this exact moment. And so not looking at yourself as the problem and what you need to fix or, integrate or add in or whatever. It's as the simple model that Nick really introduced to me was look at the inputs, look at the outputs. And, one of the foundational principles that I like to teach, even before watching sunrise, because some people can find that quite difficult, is to just turn that Wi-Fi router off at night. You need to mitigate the artificial visible and artificial non-visible from destroying you while you're sleeping. So that to me is actually the best way to, initially unplug, all of that chaos that's disorganizing your body. So just make one little change to put your wearable on airplane mode, or just take it off and get rid of it. Or just instead of using those AirPods, use some air tube headsets. Instead of using, your phone all the time when you're sitting on the couch for 2 hours in the evening, get an Ethernet cord and get an adapter and plug that in. Or better off, get a fiber optic cable and fiber optic adapter, like I do here. Something simple like that. So it's literally the phone's communicating through light. There's zero electric field.
Yeah.
Something very simple like that can totally reduce your amount of exposure, and it's different for everyone. What is your biggest EMF exposure? What is your biggest artificial light exposure? And just figure out a way to slowly decrease that over time and watch your body come alive. Watch that thing that you've been searching for in a diet or an exercise plan or a gymnasium or a strategy where you're out in nature, or that riding that bike 15 kilometers. You'll find those hormones, those feel-good things you've been chasing in your psychedelic journeys. You'll find that wake up when you alleviate that pressure from the artificial visible and non-visible light off the system. And you'll start to have more faith in feeling your body, that it is medicine, as Nick was saying.
So it's kind of like we are examining everything in our life, whether it's natural or not, whether it's visible or invisible. Are they part of nature? If they're not part of nature, they might not be serving us very well. Maybe just explain a little bit more about non-native EMF, the light, we can see it with our eyes, but what is those invisible ones that people need to pay attention to?
Yeah, it's a good one, Alison. So, I'll just go through the Building Biology Institute has, 9 principles of visible and non-visible light that you need to mitigate in all bedrooms. Let's just use that as an example. So you got visible light, which is LEDs, unbalanced light, mostly much more blue than infrared. So that's a big problem. Then you've got flicker. Now that comes from the AC switching on and off. So this is a stress on the body. It's called the stroboscopic effect, and it can waste huge amounts of ATP in the eye and the brain and cause lots of issues where you're not actually able to hydrate your cells and capture natural light as well. So that's the visible side. And then the non-visible side, you have DC and AC electric and magnetic fields. So there's 4, and they can come from battery operated devices, the DC side, or the AC can come from plugged into the AC power grid. Then you've got dirty electricity, and they're like lightning bolts that layer on top of the AC electric fields. The AC electric fields press on the surface. The lightning bolts, the dirty electricity punches through the skin and changes things subcellular. Then you've got low-level currents, and this one, not many people even know about. Not many building biologists even know about this one, but you can actually be getting slightly electrocuted every time that you use a pan on your induction stove that's stainless steel and you're using a spatula, because you now have created a circuit all the way out through your wiring that has dirty electricity and electric fields on it. At the same time, when you wash your hands or even take a shower, you've got metal pipes that are connecting, and a lot of the time it's metal, connecting through to the shower head, and the water's conducting those low-level currents. So you're actually getting electrocuted while you shower. Now, it's very low levels, so most people are imperceivable of these things, but you can measure these things. So that's low-level currents. And then, of course, you have radio frequency. And this is the one that most people focus on. It's the Bluetooth, the 4G, the 5G, 6G coming out now, Starlink in the 17 to 24 gigahertz frequencies. So all of these radio frequencies, they act to actually cause huge amounts of dysfunction, not just on the surface, but actually deeper inside the body, because it's quite a long wavelength. And so you're causing all the different biological effects that Deborah Davis and Martin Pall and Andrew Marino and all these greats before me, even Paul Heroux. Paul Heroux is an expert on a lot of the low frequency exposures. And so he's someone who I really revere in this space, that talks about even very micro exposures across a room has shown to actually impact cardiac rhythms. So we are so exquisitely sensitive to all of these electromagnetic fields, visible and non-visible in our environments. And so when you get, and you can fast track all of this problem by finding a building biologist who's certified, who does a good job, who comes recommended. And if you do that, just employ them to look at your bedroom to begin with. That's just something that, you know, if you're in an apartment building, you've got wireless around you, drop a Faraday cage over, make sure it's grounded properly, good electrical grounding in the house, and put a mat underneath. So it's a full Faraday cage. Most people don't put the mats, and then they wonder why their neighbor's Wi-Fi underneath is affecting them. So you can do that solution. You can do paint on walls where you actually shield from the radio frequency. You can do personal items. So you can actually have sleeping bags or blankets or beanies or t-shirts or gloves so that you don't get the fields on the body. You can do all these types of things. You can go wild with Faraday bags for your phone and backpacks and all these different things, but really look at the bedroom environment, find out what EMFs are there. If you need to get a cheap meter, get something that's a couple $100. And I can put in the show notes if you want, Alison. I can send you a little recommendation of some do-at-home meters that would actually make a big difference if you just have a couple $100 and you really want to do, you know, an assessment of your own house, just amateur level, make some changes. But, you know, the biological implications of being exposed to these fields chronically is devastating. And we're seeing that in transgenerational epigenetics through children suffering diseases that only our grandparents suffer when they turn 80 or 90 or 100. And, you know, you can ask Nick this question as well. I'm sure he's seen some things in his practice because he examines patients energetically, physically, all the different ways. And he will see body patterns and movement patterns and nervous system balances and fluid flows and air pressure system changes in the body that are, you've got a 16-year-old in front of you, but they feel like a 60-year-old. So I'm sure Nick might go into that if he wants to.
Yeah, please, Nick.
Oh yeah, you're right on, man. It's heartbreaking almost every day. I spent yesterday warning a colleague of mine who's essentially I'm mentoring him. I just said, mate, it's the Wild West out there now. Like people that gave up the practice 10 years ago, the landscape's changed so rapidly. We're not even dealing with the same stuff that they used to deal with. Like if you're not adaptable, if you're not right on the cutting edge of these sorts of things and have the wherewithal to pull them together into a system that hits the ground running with potency, man, you're playing catch up because like every day I go into work, I just sit down, just center myself and just go, hey, just show up as best you can for what's walking in that door because they're in a world of misery and it's up to us to get in the trenches together and see if we can find some solutions.
Yeah, I see young children complaining about being tired, which is very different from the era where I was growing up. I feel like I was bulletproof. There's nothing stops me. It's very interesting to see a very different landscape, especially seeing the children on iPad and the phone when their mom and dad was doing something. You just don't know what to do. You just feel a little bit sad. And also because, you know, we are having this busy life and mom and dad are both working full time and children just don't get a proper attention and the time and they spend. And so they spend a lot of time indoors and we don't use our body as much as before, you know, going outside and play with the dirt and rocks. Now we just seems like we sit down a lot. We think about life instead of doing life. How do you encourage people to go back lots of people know that that's the right thing to do, go back to nature, but they just feel like it's an uphill struggle. It's very hard to do. If there's one or two advice you can give to them to go back, to use their body more, what would that be?
Well,
I'd love to.
oh,
I'd love to go first if that's all right.
yeah, sure, man.
It's
It's like
you
the
know
hand buzzer moment.
mine's going to be super quick because honestly, my number one go-to and the only piece of advice I really have for this is set yourself up so you cannot fail at this. Create an environment where you don't have as much furniture, so you sit on the floor. Create an environment where you have dinner with your family or lunch or breakfast outside at a table under cover. Set up yourself so that you have a clean sleeping environment. Set up yourself so that you can, you know, automatically be able to, wake up at a right time or put a bedtime alarm on or just set up be the leader for your family. Your kids will follow whatever you do. So just create an environment where you literally cannot fail at being healthy. And then that truly will bring out the expression of, total health for yourself.
Well, I was going to say that I think we should acknowledge, first of all, that everybody, without exception, is trying the best they can try.
Yeah.
And so we can all be unified by that one phenomenon alone. And so one of the biggest heart-wrenching moments that I feel in the health space is the downhill flowing judgment and discernment about practices that other people have found themselves using to get by. It's very healthy to start from the notion that we're all one and that our best chance to raise the vibration of other people is to see them through the lens of them doing the very best that they can and to just change ourselves initially, and the people that are really willing in slow, gentle, tender increments and let that spread out as a way, someone will always find an opportunity to advance their situation if it's not drilled into them how bad they're doing, creating a big recoil at an emotional level. So I think the first prerogative is to lead by example and not in the normal sort of egotistical way of, hey, look at me. This is my Instagram account and look how great I'm doing. And just by juxtaposition, this is how bad you're doing. And that makes me feel a little bit better about myself for a nanosecond. Not in that way. In the way that we just go about our business feeling really good and inviting anybody, anytime, any level in any aspect of it to come and try that with us and just forming those nodes of community in a world that's bereft of genuine community and connection, and just starting one little bit at a time. And I actually think that the kind of potency that these practices and other practices have and they possess can actually do the job in a short-ish amount of time to make a material difference to everyone's health worldwide.
Yeah, start with small. I've been thinking about, Nathan, do you have something to say?
No, that was phenomenal. Well said.
That is beautiful. We do know the right thing to do. I think we have the knowing. Sometimes we got held back by some kind of lack of strength or lack of energy. I've been thinking it's almost like a recursive loop. It's not A to B or B to C. It's like a cycle going. Like, where is the start? We're talking about the root cause healing. We want to find the root. Where is the root?
Well, there is none, and that's the nature of the recursive loop. And that's why I said earlier that I think the best strategy, albeit an unscientific one and not linear, which is the way our society generally structures their relationship with time and space, is to have a little go in as many different aspects around the total sphere of existence itself. And so instead of leaving that up to someone to decide where those lever points are, we've just structured that for them in a really cheap and cheerful and egalitarian way. anybody, anywhere, anytime can jump on the circle that we've created. And that's the most important thing that we've done, is make sure that the circle makes sense, make sure that we're not being blinded by things in so much as we cannot be. And just being inviting to everyone to just jump on the circle, have a little bit of a go around this circle and watch that circle expand to accommodate more and more either data points on the circle or ever increasing expansion of that circle to get really, really close to what people really are, which is an enormous, immense, abundant, radiant being of goodness. Feeling that way, thinking that way, behaving that way, that is where humanity is heading one way or another, whether we go through another massive trauma loop in order to have that realization, or we can, in some sort of luciferic manner, get ahead of that and just go, hey guys, this isn't really going in the right direction. I think if we all just pull a little bit here and even do it in a non-altruistic way, feel good yourself. You deserve to feel good. A lot of people have, this isn't a root cause, so I'm conscious of championing it in the context of there not being a root cause, but a lot of people don't feel anymore like they deserve to feel good. And in fact, they'll do a whole bunch of practices paradoxically to confirm to them that they don't deserve to feel good. They'll try half, or they'll try an aspect of one part of the loop, and then they'll go, yep, see, told you, I'm fundamentally not good. I'm fundamentally tired. I'm fundamentally broken. And it's not my fault. It's my parents' fault, or it's this person's fault, or it's that thing's fault, or I work too much. No. It's all true. We get it. But you do deserve to feel good. And the way to feel good is in your power. It is in your hands. Start the journey. Receive the goodness. Invest that goodness in more goodness. And then when you have enough of that goodness brimming from you that you don't need to be scarce about it, you don't need to take someone else's goodness, you don't need to do any of those funny bugger games, then you can share your goodness and watch that goodness spread. That's the way.
It's so beautiful. Yeah. So is there something about the internal terrain you talk about in the approach? Or is it different?
You need to find that. What do you mean?
Internal terrain. I think it's somewhere mentioned is about terrain, internal environment or something. Or did I read somewhere else?
Oh, we all probably could have used a phrase similar to that, but I just don't want to jump ahead if it was directly from Nath's or Ryan's section. Nath?
No, I don't think specifically. I probably would have used it creating a better terrain when you obviously, maybe I would have actually mentioned it. I'm trying to remember deep down somewhere in there, but no, it's probably the same concept you're thinking, Nick, with your explanation. So
I may have used it in the context of making a better map inside yourself. So, and when I say map, we're talking about a funny concept that when you develop new movements developmentally, what you do is you make a map of those movements. And the deal with nature was that in order to then go and do those movements again, you would draw on a large amount of the infrastructure that was required or prerequisital in order to build that map in the first instance. But what tends to happen in our world is we retain the map, but we lose a lot of the prerequisital conditioning that was required to build the map in the first place. And we go and we do that map, we execute that map in a way that uses different tissue. It's called motor equivalence. It's very technical. That's as much as I want to get into it. But basically, you do something that looks very, very similar to the task that you've learned to do, except you use completely different effectors to do that. You use completely different tissue, mechanisms, metabolic structures in order to execute that movement. And so naturally, you pay a tax premium on doing it that way instead of the way that it was fashioned in the first place. A good example is if you lay someone on the ground in like a simple Superman pose on or off an oove, and you put an adult there and you get them to extend their neck and look up towards the ceiling, a lot of people will find that very, very metabolically exertive within 60 seconds. Yet if you have a look at a developing baby, they will do that for months in an accrued manner months and months and months before they're given the privilege of sitting up and controlling that front to back tone. So it just shows, oh, well, then you take it for granted. You sit and you stand all day, every day, without the prerequisite or conditioning in order to do that. What do you think is going to happen when you sit or stand? And then we get these kind of correlations that get misconstrued as causations. Everyone's jumping up and down about how sitting, I'm quoting here, it's not what I believe, sitting is the new smoking. Well, sitting's not the new smoking. Sitting poorly is bad for you. Okay, I get that. Why don't we just sit well? That would be an antidote to that without the fear and the hyperbole.
I love that. I love that. Nathan, is getting dark for you. So the last question is, what are you excited about the most in the next 12 months? And is anything that the audience can get involved in if they're interested in your work?
I'm most excited about the retreat coming up in November, Nick.
Is that in Solomon Islands?
Yep.
Or tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, it is just glorious. It is the most fun. I mean, imagine it's like an Indiana Jones style adventure, straight up just getting there. It feels like you're going just beautifully back in time, not in a primitive way, but just in a pristine way. The way you have to get there, it's so remote that you have to go on these really small planes, these unreal boats through this saltwater lagoon. You land there. It's expert boatmanship, even just to get into where you have to get off, to walk to where you're going to live for 7 days. And so just the adventure around it is one aspect that's just cool enough by itself. And then the experiences there that aren't immediately related to BioTra are just jaw-dropping, once in a lifetime opportunities. I took my 6-year-old daughter there last time. To hear her still talking about free diving through coral tunnels and snorkeling with manta rays, it's just like and it's just there. Nature is just there in full abundance. And then, of course, we drop you into 7 days of a deep immersion with the founders of BioTra, and we cover off everything. And it's not just the course content that you get, which obviously we believe in and think is really useful for everyone, but it's the time in between with other seekers, the other participants, and the facilitators as well, where we just go deep, we go straight, we go down the garden path, and almost everything just gets unearthed, and there's a solution for everything. So we just have a blast, and that's in November. And yeah, we everyone that comes is just the right fit. So if you think that it's in any way interesting to you, you are perfect. You are the perfect candidate to come.
Sounds like a perfect retreat to me.
Yeah, and because it's in the Solomon Islands, we make it really affordable. We run retreats in Australia, have done, will do again. But the commerce of doing that means that the overheads are just bigger. It's just part of the course. Whereas when we go to the Solomons, we can make something that real people can attend. And it doesn't price out anyone. So it's one of our core values is medicine that's available for everyone. That naturally deviates marginally when we're putting an immersive experience down, because we have to cover costs, unlike the approach itself, which is designed to be very cheap and cheerful and accessible. But the same value flows into how we've structured and run the retreats. So we want real people there. We want people that want to get more information, want to feel better in themselves, and best of all, want to do so in such a way that it's so stabilized, it's so solid in their practice that you can't go back from that. You bring that home to your family and your friends, and everything starts to flow in the right direction.
It's exceptional because we even have community still from last year and the year before and the year before that. We actually still always get questions here and there. You develop new friendships, and you can even, whatever your need and desire is to get out of that, you will absolutely get, not only exceed that, but you will actually get something that you would have never got going anywhere else. That you would have expected. So to me, these events, and I've facilitated many retreats, and I don't think I've found an equivalent experience that allows you to interact so authentically, so genuinely. We talk about, fast tracking your growth. I mean, this is an experience that, it's not just, there's many other retreat facilitators and retreats that I've even facilitated at that people go to. And you do hear a lot of the similar sort of experiences. It was about the community. It was exceptional. And this one, I'm a bit biased because I'm going to be there and I love running these, but every single bit of feedback I hear from people is like, wow, I never would have got to this point. And it's not necessarily true because they would have taken a much longer route. But if you're truly looking to immerse yourself, maybe you've read the book, maybe you've bought the course, maybe you've listened to the podcast, maybe this is the first time you've ever looked at an approach of total health. But either way, this is going to be an exceptional experience. So, we really love to have you. And it's in some ways, a way of not only radically taking responsibility for your life, but you don't have to do many of these until you grow into who you feel you need to be in that next phase. And I mean, take it from me, take it from Nick. Nick sees no more than a patient twice. He works with a patient once or twice, and they're off to the next part of their journey. Same with me. I'm not the end game for people. These autistic kids, these Parkinson's patients, all these people once 1, 2, 3 years of going from mute to being very functional, they move on to the next phase of their development. So if you feel this calling to you, there's an invitation there to help you get to that next stage and really bring that message home into yourself. So that's why I'm so excited, because to me, there was nothing more exciting on my journey than learning why I got sick, what I can do better, and then to unfold myself like a fountain of all the energy and knowledge and specialness of connection and presence that I have to be able to help others. So for me, retreats are really could sometimes be an actual moment of divine grace in someone's life. So if you haven't been to one, definitely encourage you. And if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I encourage anyone to check out your website and the landing page. And I had a look. The feedback was absolutely overwhelming. It's definitely helped people to find what is possible in their life. It's amazing to see. Thank you so much for being here today. And I'm really grateful, so grateful for everything you're doing, giving the guidance and the tools and wisdom so people can get onto the circle. And I love both of you in terms of your leadership, and you want to give the best to your clients. You don't want to hold on to them long, but you want to teach them to be their best teacher. So I absolutely admire for what you're doing and what you're bringing to this world. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and it's been a very empowering and informative session. And I'm pretty sure this could be a turning point for someone like Jack Cruz did you and for me. I appreciate you so much. And before we wrap up, there's one question I like to ask all my guests. Imagine if you are talking to your 10 years younger self, what advice would you give to him? Also, if your 10 years older self appear now in front of you, what do you think he's going to tell you?
Well, 10 years ago, I should have thought, mate, you'll have 3 kids soon, so rack up as much free time as you can. And in 10 years' time, I hope that person looks back and says, you are right on point, spending every waking moment you can contributing to your dream and with your family. And this time is so precious. So hold the course, and all the normal good things that are flowing right now will continue to flow.
Beautiful.
I love that, Nick. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, probably, I would say 3 months from now, 10 years ago. So what would I say is an opportune time to intervene prior to surgery and chemo, and, that old question of would you do it again type thing. So I guess for myself, I would love to drop a seed in there to clean up my environment and my lifestyle a little bit. Just, the advice I've given here was, just some of the basic stuff that I could have done, and would have never had to go get that ultrasound, never had to go through that journey. But it was meant to be. So I would definitely drop in some little whisper in my ear that it's not diet and exercise that controls your chronic disease manifestation. That's a very small component of it. So I would hopefully drop that bit of curiosity in there and see what came of it. And then as my older self, I have no kids. I have no partner right now. I have, I live in, I chase the sun. I don't think I've had a winter in 7 years. So I go Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, pretty much every single change of season. So I think in 10 years time, I'd say, like Nick was saying, to his younger self, make the most of, the ability to travel to Madrid and inspire people at a gigantic event there, or go to Tennessee and inspire people there, or, create and forge some new ideas and manifest that into reality. Because until I birth a human with, part of my energy, I feel birthing, creative products and creative services, creative ideas, creative communication and connection is probably what I really want to thrive in at the moment. So yeah, make the most of being right now.
Thank you so much for living what you teach. It's a real quality that I see in both of you. So thank you so much.